All right, quick question. It's like a survey question I'm going to ask you guys. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you care about the gluteus medius muscle?
A lot.
So the response that's going to come back will be anywhere from, well, I didn't really care about it at all, to, I'm sure by the time we get to the end of this, it's going to be important. So, by way of a little story, the gluteus medius is one of our butt muscles. And the one that gets the most fame and notoriety is the largest muscle in our body, which is the maximus, which is the one that pulls our leg backward. And there's another one in the front called the quadricep that pulls our legs forward. And getting those to work helps us move forward in life. And that is a wonderful, happy, healthy thing. And when we run or when we walk or when we do our usual perambulation, we're using the gluteus maximus a lot and we're using the quadriceps a lot. And the other muscles, the gluteus medius is actually used for pulling the leg to the side. So, and there's not a whole lot of need for us to step to the side in many cases. A bunch of years ago, I was on a ski trip with my brother, and we're in a situation where we were going back to the base lodge, and I had to sidestep up and to the left. And there was this interesting popping in my hip. It's like, what is that about? And it's just like I would step and I'd go pop and it would feel, it wasn't tremendously uncomfortable, but I would feel it. It's like, well, I wonder what that is. And of course I sprang into action and ignored it until the same ski trip the following year where the same thing happened again. My hip is popping up. Well, that's just interesting. And every once in a while I would have some pain on that side of my body, but I didn't necessarily connect the two of them together. And then the same thing happened in 2020, the last ski trip before the pandemic closed in. And this time it kind of stuck around a little bit. It was achy. So I set about having the chiropractor try and help me identify what the problem was, and he was not particularly helpful. And then I saw a friend of mine who's a physical therapist, and she tried narrowing it down, but it was all kind of hit or miss. And as I tell you this story about my gluteus medius, you're thinking, does this have anything to do with New Thought? Is this a spiritual story at all? And it is. The talk is about flex your spiritual muscle. And the idea is that our spiritual practice and our spirituality is a muscle just like the physical muscles in our body. And when we take care of them, they will carry us very nicely and comfortably through our life. And when we don't, then other things will happen. So with that as the warning, I'll tell you a little bit more of the story, which involved me having it bother me periodically. So last November, I went to a sports medicine doctor. And he diagnosed it as an incredibly weak gluteus medius muscle, which he did by having me lie down on the table on my side and try and lift my leg up. And I could, and then he could push it down with one finger. Whereas if I rolled on my back a little bit and used my quadricep, there was no way he was going to push my leg down. So, all right, there was something out of balance there. And he gave me some exercises to try. And I dutifully went home and did them every once in a while. And it started to hurt. It was just like, oh, I need different exercises for this. And then I realized on one of the exercises, or one of the meditations in the afternoon, that I know a physical therapist. So Hannah is walking home from work, and she's walking down the levee in New Orleans on her way from work to home. And I say, what exercises do you know for the gluteus medius? Because she's a wonderful physical therapist. She trained for that. She's doing that. That's her job. That's her work. And she was very thoughtful and gave me a good answer. I didn't ask the right question. The right question would be, what's a good gluteus medius exercise for me? Because she gave me a range of them. And upon doing her exercise, it turns out the one that she gave me was a little less strenuous than the one that the doctor had given me, but that's the one that was overdoing it for me. So I was already overstressed, and I tried some more, and time passes, the earth cools, and I wound up with a cane. Now, with ambulatory issues, you kind of know that things have come to a head when there's a cane involved. So, okay, wheelchair is worse or more significant, but the cane is something there. So it was indicating that something needed to change. Well, it didn't need to change. I could continue to be in agony and not be able to walk my dog. That didn't seem like a good alternative. So what I did was I asked the right question, and that was a matter of getting a local physical therapist who could actually work on me and work with me and give me some exercises. And so I've been seeing the physical therapist for a couple of weeks now, and she's right around the corner, and she's wonderful. And the exercise that she started me with is so much milder than any of the ones that, one of the ones that Hannah gave me, but it seemed so simple because I was already doing these other things. And I now progressed to the one that Hannah did give me, and eventually I'll strengthen up to the point where I can do the other one. But it's about asking the right question, and it's about building up that muscle and allowing ourselves to get stronger and stronger. Because a couple of weeks ago, I had a cane. And last week, I loaned the cane to my son-in-law because he did something to his hip. So I don't need the cane anymore. The tools are still available, the resources are still available, but I don't need that right now. To the point where Sandy and I got to go for a walk in the woods this week together. And, I was aware that my hip was a little bit sensitive, but it wasn't debilitating the way that it had been previously. So it's about understanding the situation that we're in, understanding the circumstance that we're in, and what can I do to strengthen myself, to move myself forward through this. You guys are familiar with Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. It has what she refers to as the list, which is all of the parts of our physicality that can cause us concern and what that might mean. Hip problems, fear of going forward in major decisions, nothing to move forward to, or carries the body in perfect balance. It's the major thrust in moving forward. And in both of those, one's for hip problems, the other one's for hips. I am in perfect balance. I move forward in life with ease and with joy at every age. And the other one is hip, hip, hooray. There is joy in every day. I am balanced and free. Hip, hip, hooray. Thank you, Louise. A little pun there. That was perfect. That was perfect. So it's about asking the right questions. It's about getting the insight into the circumstance and the situation, the way it exists for us. Jo Catanzaro is a wonderful practitioner. She's also an amazingly skilled nurse. And so she has some doctor jokes, as I'm sure all nurses have. And this one has stuck with me. The first question is, or the first riddle is, how do you hide something from a surgeon? And the answer is, you write it down in the chart. And the other one is, how do you hide something from an internal medicine doctor? And the answer is, you cover it up with gauze. And those are funny and a little bit true. And they're a reminder that in all of our experiences, all of our situations, there is the possibility of hiding something. And it works differently for everybody. So how do you hide something from your spiritual growth? Yes, I am looping this back around to our spiritual growth. How do you hide something from your spiritual growth and development and unfoldment? Well, you blame it on something that happened in the past or somebody else, and then you build up a resentment. And that's the way that we keep ourselves from growing spiritually. And the process that I'm describing is, of course, forgiveness. We get to acknowledge, yes, this thing happened. This is the circumstance, the situation that I dealt with. And it sucked. It was painful. It was unpleasant. And it's not a defining factor in my life anymore. I'm no longer going to let that be a defining factor in my life. Now, whoever did that horrible thing to me, they're still out there. They still did that. They still own it. But I'm not going to have to carry around the resentment about that. Resentment has been described as drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. So, and when you put it that way, it's like, well, that's not going to work. And of course, it's true. That's not going to work. So, the way to flex your spiritual muscles and the way to grow is to practice. And practice, practice, practice. There's another section in J. Scott Neal's book. When we choose to flex our spiritual muscles, we raise our consciousness to a more prestigious level of awareness. Positive drive, ambition, and demand to be the best of ourselves in action becomes our norm as we make sure we are headed in the right direction within our hearts, minds, bodies, and world. In return, the world around us begins to give affirmative support that is truly unparalleled in our own personal history. The reason that we want to do the spiritual practice is because we are not doing this ourselves. We are in partnership with the infinite. That infinite creative power that creates everything has created each of us. And it is ready to create something new and spectacular and wonderful with sweetness and richness and power and strength and comfort and hip hip hooray for each of us. And the way that we move into that new experience of a deeper awareness of our spiritual truth, of a greater spiritual strength, of being able to co-create our lives with that infinite creative power that creates everything, is to do it. It's practice. So we've got that spiritual practices class that's coming up starting next month. It's going to be a summertime thing. We're going to go out of our way to make it an easy class, so there's not going to be huge amounts of reading. It's going to be from Ram Dass's book, Journey of Awakening, which is a wonderful book, which is kind of different meditative and spiritual practices we can be involved in. And we're going to layer in probably the loveliest book that Ernest Holmes wrote, which is this thing called You, which is just easy to read and positive and uplifting, and there's none of that torturous evolution sort of thing that the practitioner students are saying, are you going to put that on the test? So it's got none of the difficult, challenging parts. It's the uplifting part of New Thought. So I strongly encourage you to get involved in the class. And our spiritual practices, there's just a huge range of practices that we have. Obviously, practical prayer is a big one. Meditation is another one that comes up a lot. Mindfulness, which is the ability to do a meditation when you're doing something else. Yoga is a physical practice that's based on mindfulness and being connected with our breath. So is walking in nature and just observing what's going on. Visioning, life visioning, is a spiritual practice. And they all work, and they all work differently, and we all engage differently with each of them. Chanting is another one. The Sufis like to dance and dance into spirituality. There's all sorts of different ways to do this. Journaling, forgiveness practices. Some of them seem joyous and effervescent, and some of them seem challenging and difficult. And the idea is to get into that flow of what is it that's right for me as I begin to flex my spiritual muscles. So, if you've been involved at any point in an athletic or a physical practice, you know that the first workout that you do when you're beginning is awkward and uncomfortable and doesn't last very long, and sometimes involves much more sweat than you thought was going to be required of the circumstance. And what happens later is growth, because when we're working out, when we're doing that yoga practice, when we're walking on a regular basis, we build up our stamina, we build up our endurance, our ability to do that aerobic or that strength activity. And then the subsequent workouts become easier, or the opportunity for us to be even more strenuous than we could have been that first time out. Because, as you guys know, I do a regular yoga practice, including on Sunday mornings. And if I had done my yoga practice that I did this morning, when I was first starting out in yoga, I would have spent the next week bathing myself in icy hot and saying oi and looking for the aspirin. As it is, I feel good because I'm in the groove. I'm in that place. I'm in alignment with what's going on. And you can do the same thing in your physical practice and in your spiritual practice. As I often say, practice makes practiced. And when the requirement comes along to be able to take something into prayer, when there's something that grabs your attention, it's an emergency, it's a crisis, it's somebody who's just, got bad news. Having that spiritual muscle memory lets you return to the awareness of spirit that much more quickly. To be aware that this is love unfolding, even though it doesn't look that way right now. And to be in that flow and in that groove. So that's the invitation today, is to get your spiritual muscle groove on. Flex your spiritual muscles. Strengthen yourself up a little bit. Practice, practice, practice. And reap the rewards, because it's a joyous new opportunity at hand for you. Putting down what's not working and taking in something great. And you deserve it. You are wonderful. And so it is.